In this video, I will give you the full process to form a Singapore company from zero as a foreigner in 2025. This will be literally the most detailed guide on the entire internet on the topic of forming a Singapore company. We will cover everything from what are the requirements to actually form a Singapore company as a foreigner, and then how you can use this company to potentially relocate to Singapore and get what's called an employment pass, and all the other requirements that you will have to, for example, do annually, like annual filings, like what records you need to keep, everything like that. So literally everything you need to know to form a Singapore company as a foreigner in one video, the best video in the entire internet on this topic. But first, you might be wondering why choose Singapore for your company. Well, there's four primary reasons. First is going to be low taxes. So Singapore has 17% corporate tax, and there's even ways to get around this if you have foreign banking. So if you don't have any Singapore sourced income and you also pay that income to a non-Singapore bank account, you're going to also get 0% tax legally, as long as you obviously don't live in Singapore and manage this from Singapore. And even if you do, there are many exemptions that can in practice reduce these tax rates to something like single digits in many cases. The second reason is the rule of law and stability. This can be quite underrated in certain kinds of businesses. Regulations, laws are all very, very business friendly, and you can expect that they're going to remain business friendly because of the stability of Singapore. Third reason is the banking. In Singapore, you can get some of the, if not the best banking in the world. Now, of course, if you are setting up as a foreigner, it can be more complicated and more cumbersome to get those best bank accounts than if you were based locally in Singapore. But we'll talk more on how to get around that later on in the video. And the fourth reason is that it can allow you to relocate to Singapore, because obviously Singapore is not just a fantastic place to have a company. It can also be potentially a very fantastic place to live and one of my favorite cities in the entire world. So before we set up this company, here is the pre-incorporation checklist on what you need to prepare to have this ready and what are the requirements to actually form this company. But first, you need to pick the right type of entity. For most people, it's going to be what's called a PTE LTD, so like the limited company structure. There's going to be other ones like a sole proprietor, like partnership, things like that. But in most cases, that's not going to be the right choice. Then you need to choose your business name and have a couple of backups in case your preferred name is taken. And you need to find your business activity for your business, and you have to obtain the official business activity code from what's called the Singapore Standard Industrial Classification 2020 framework, where you're going to be able to find the business activity that most closely matches your actual company activity, what your company actually does. And then you need to make sure that you're going to meet three requirements. Number one, you need to have at least one resident director in Singapore, or if you don't have that, then you need to use what's called a nominee director service. The second requirement is that you need to have a company secretary. Every Singapore company needs to have a local Singapore resident company secretary. And number three, you need to have a registered address, which is going to be the official address of your company. Now, this doesn't have to be the address where you actually do business. This is just the address where this company is registered. And if you don't have an address that you can use, you need to find a service provider where you can get this address from. Now, the second step, which is technically optional, but in 99% of cases, you should do this, is to find a service provider who can take care of all of this for you. Because as we can see, there's already quite a few things that we would need to have. We would need to have this nominee director set up. We would need to find a secretary. We would need to have an address, like all these different things you need to understand. And if you're an entrepreneur who's making a lot of money, it's not really worth your time to like figure all of this out and like find like 3 different service providers for all these different services you need. It's much better to find one place, like one service provider that can provide all of this in one package. The company that I partner with for a long time on this channel is awesome. They are pretty much the best company out there when it comes to Singapore setup. They have set up more than 30,000 companies globally, and with them, like, you don't need to be in Singapore physically. All of this happens completely online. You essentially just pay for their service, which covers, by the way, all the government fees, like every single fee. There are no hidden fees after this, which is very important to understand, because a lot of service providers, like whoever you use, make sure to do your due diligence, because a lot of them will charge hidden fees. They will charge for government fees separately, things like that. With Awesome, what you get is the secretary, the nominee director, and the registered address all in one package, which you obviously will have to renew every single year if you keep using their service. And also if later on you want to use this company to relocate to Singapore, you can also add this as an add-on where Awesome will help you also fill out your employment pass application for you and everything like that. If you want to use Awesome to set up a Singapore company, you're going to use the link down below in the description to get 16% off on all of their packages. If you're a foreigner, it's actually a requirement anyway for you to have a service provider to set up your company, because it is not allowed for foreigners to set up these companies directly. So you would anyway need to find someone to actually file this in the government website. So you might as well just use someone who's going to give you everything in one, like Awesome. Now, after you have found a service provider who can do this for you, you can proceed with the incorporation of your company on the ACRA website, which is the official government portal where essentially everything relating to Singapore companies is handled. Now, if you're using a service provider at this stage, they will simply collect all the documents from you, like your passport, your proof of address, like whatever else you need, and they will proceed and actually register your company on the government website. So most likely that is what's going to be done. You don't need to really know anything going forward because they will tell you, but just for your information, the steps that are involved here are, first of all, you need to complete identity verification. You need to verify who you are with your identity documents. You need to decide, obviously, when your financial year is going to end. And then you need to draft what's called a company constitution. Now, there's an official template for this on the ACRA website, which you can take a look at. It's just going to include some information about the business name, the business activities, any liabilities of the members of the company, total amount of share capital, and everything like that. And then you need to appoint the key people for your company, like your directors, your secretary, and also importantly, if you have a revenue of above 5 million Singaporean dollars, you're also going to need to appoint an auditor for your company. And then you need to decide your paid up capital for your company. So how much capital are you going to be transferring to this company on the day of incorporation? Now, luckily, there are no minimums for this. You can literally just transfer 1 Singapore dollar and that is your paid up capital, and there is no issue with that. And then after all of this is done, this application is going to be submitted to ACRA, and it's going to take a couple of days for this to be processed. And after your company is incorporated, we can move on to the post-incorporation steps. So first of all, right as you get your company registered, you need to get it registered with BizFile, which is essentially a website where all kind of records for your company are going to be kept in digital form and things like that. Every new company is going to get a free business profile to BizFile. And something that people don't realize is that you want to make sure that you use this free account within 30 days of registration of your company. Otherwise, you'll lose essentially this free access to BizFile and you're going to have to pay for this account. But again, obviously, if you use a service provider, this is going to be taking care of this for you. And after that, you can move on to the exciting step of finding a bank account for your company. Now, if you're a Singapore resident, or if you're going to be relocating to Singapore with this company, it's going to be much easier, obviously, to get pretty much any kind of bank account for your company that you want. Otherwise, you're probably going to want to start with a digital bank, which are pretty amazing also in Singapore. You have Aspire and many other platforms like that. You might have to start with that. It kind of also depends on your business activities and things like that, like which banks are going to approve you and things like that. But if you use Awesome, they have specific connections to certain banks, so they can essentially ensure that your company is going to get some kind of bank account, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you have a company, but your company cannot get banking because no bank will accept you. And also at this stage, if you are interested in moving to Singapore, you can apply for what's called an employment pass. Many people think that it's super complicated to move to Singapore. You need to have millions and millions invested, but that is not true at all. If you have a Singapore company, at any point, you can apply for an employment pass, which is like a work visa, which you get via this company. Now, it's not as simple as just like giving yourself this work visa. You need to pass what's called a Compass point system, where you essentially get points for certain criteria. Now, I made a more detailed video on this entire process, how to qualify for it, which you can find on this channel, but that is something that you have access to at any time. And after that, what are the annual requirements and reporting that you need to be aware of for this company? This is something that you obviously don't want to neglect. But the first thing is that every Singapore company has to hold what's called an annual general meeting, which is officially like a meeting with the directors and the shareholders, where like officially what happens is that the accounts are sent to the shareholders for approval and a couple of formalities like that. Now, this is going to be very easy to do if it's just you, like a simple company, but this is still something that officially has to be done every single year. And if you are not a listed company, you need to hold this AGM within the first 6 months of incorporation. And the next thing to be aware of is obviously annual returns. Now, all private companies must file their annual returns to ACRA within 7 months of the end of the tax year. And also at any time, if anything changes about your company, like the directors or any important details, you have to keep ACRA up to date about all kinds of changes like this. And this is officially the duty of the company secretary to do this. But obviously, if anything changes, you would need to let your secretary know so that they can let ACRA know of any kind of changes, or otherwise there are going to be fines. And next, if you're wondering about how to relocate to Singapore, how to get this employment pass, how to qualify for it, you can watch this video right here. And if you're wondering how you can reduce your taxes in Singapore to actually pay much less than the 17% sticker rate, you can watch this video right here. So watch one of these videos next, and I will see you in the next video.